Let's take a look at live sampling within Reason. When working with live sampling, you can sample your own sounds by connecting a mic, or you can even sample the outputs of any instrument device within Reason. So the sampling feature itself is available in the NNXT, the NN19, Redrum, Kong, or even the RV7000. And that's the RV7000 that's in Reason 8.3, not the older one. So I'll go ahead and F6 and maximize the rack. Let's bring in a Kong, Redrum, NNXT, and an RV7000. So I just want to briefly go over where you can access the sample feature within each of these. If I click on the arrow here and open up the remote programmer, we can see that we then have the start sampling button. With the RV7000, you do have a 15-second limitation for recording that, and anything beyond that will be truncated. And when we're recording a sample within the RV7000, this is going to be used as an impulse response to, it's going to analyze that audio that you've recorded in whatever space you're in and use that. The convolution engine in the RV7000 will then use that to recreate that space that you're working with. Now for the NN19, you can access the sample feature by clicking there. And so I'm just going to go ahead and delete these two out for the time being. With the NNXT, and I'm going to right click and reset this device. If we expand out the remote editor, we can see our sample button is there. Scrolling up, for the Redrum, each of the 10 drum channels within Redrum has a sample button in the upper corner there. So you can load 10 separate samples and create your own drum kit, all from live samples if you'd like, which I'd recommend giving that a try sometime. For Kong, I'm actually going to right click and reset this device as well. If we expand out to show the drum and effects area, select whatever pad you'd like to load your live sample in. We're on pad 1. I'll click the down arrow and load in an NN Nano sampler, and we can see our sample button is there. Now whenever you're sampling in Reason, the created audio files are going to be in the WAV format, and the sample rate is going to be determined by the settings in the audio tab of your preferences. So if I come to Edit and choose Preferences at the bottom, being sure that you're on the audio tab, whatever you choose here as the sample rate, that will be what is used for your recorded audio. And the bit depth is going to be determined by your audio interface. And I'm currently using a Focusrite Scarlett Solo, and the bit depth for that device is 24-bit. So with my current settings, any audio that I record live through the sample feature is going to be 24-bit, 44.1 kilohertz. Another thing to keep in mind when you're setting up for recording live sampling is that you want to be sure that your active input channels, that you've got something here. Right now I don't have any set, but that's because I'm using the laptop audio card at the moment. But if I come and change this to the Focusrite, we can see that I now have 2 input channels available. And the Scarlett Solo only has 2 inputs, 2 ins and 2 outs, as we can see here. If your audio interface has more inputs, then you'd want to be sure that you click the channels button and make those active. That is, if you want to record your sample from those other channels beyond the first 2. By default, Reason will set up these first 2 for you. So technically you don't even need to come in here if you're just going to have your microphone hooked up to audio input 1 or 2. So we'll close out of here now. Let's take a look at the hardware interface within Reason then. And we can see that I've got some activity here on channel 1. And so any audio input that can be used for the sampler is going to have a green or yellow LED. Since my audio interface only has 2 inputs, I've got green LEDs for both of those. If your audio interface has, say, 8 inputs and you've made them active in the audio tab of the preferences menu where we just were, you would see yellow LEDs here. And then you could come and choose those. And whenever you select, you'll see at the big meter here, we can then monitor our incoming signal. And in the other corner here of the hardware interface, we have a monitor button. So if we'd like to monitor our incoming signal, we can just click that button. You've got the level adjustment for the monitored signal, and you've got an auto button here. And if we activate the auto button, essentially it will turn on monitoring whenever there's a signal coming through. If there's not, then it will turn it off. Flipping around to look at the back of the hardware interface, we can see that Reason has automatically created a connection here from channel 1 and 2 of the audio input to the left and right input of the sampling device. So if you do decide to use a different channel besides 1 or 2, you would then say, if you want to use number 9, you then want to just click and drag that over to the input on the sampling input area. And since I'm only recording channel 1, I actually don't need this right channel, so I could just drag and get rid of that cable connection. So we can flip back around by hitting tab, and we can see that I still have my incoming signal being monitored here. Let's then take a look at the actual procedure for sampling now that we've got all of our cables set up and everything routed properly. Just be sure that you have made proper audio adjustments at your audio interface for the level, setting the level, and paying attention to the meter here as well. So there are 2 different ways that you can sample. You can click and hold with your left mouse button. Once you release, it will stop recording. You can also just click once and Reason will record for 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, it will then start back from the beginning and record another pass through. If you do decide to use the one-click method and record for 30 seconds or however long, you do have a stop button available to you. You also have a quick access back button to restart the recording without having to stop and come back to the sample button. So let's take a look at the first method of click and holding. I'm just going to record a snap of the fingers into pad 1 here. Okay, now let's take a look at the other method, and for this I'm going to use the NNXT, and I'm going to record a singing bowl. This will be a bit of a longer sample, and I will just click once and let this record back until the singing bowl stops. Okay, so we've now recorded our samples, and in my instance, with the screen capture program that I'm using, for some reason I haven't been able to get it to record the audio playing back from my Focusrite yet, so I actually need to come to my preferences and change this to the DirectX driver and Realtek audio card on my laptop, so that then this will play back in the screen capture program. This is not something that you would need to do. And so now if I click, we can hear our finger snap. Now within the NN-Nano, we can click on the Edit Sample button and we can see our signal there. I can select and crop, and I want to get that right near the transient on there. I can also normalize that. We can reverse it, put a fade in or fade out. Just be sure that you save your changes. So that's our snap. Now let's take a look at our singing bowl. And for this, when you're using the NNXT, all of our recorded samples are going to be stored in the, if we come to the browser here and look at song samples, clicking here allows you to take a look at all of the samples within the song that you're working with. So the top folder assigned samples, if I expand that out, let's take a look at Kong. Sample 1, we can see that's our finger snap. And we could have renamed that whatever we like in the editor. But sample 1 is just the default name that Reason gave it. Now if we expand out the NNXT, we can see that sample 2, this is our singing bowl. So you can see how these are named sequentially based on the order that you record. Now if we come to all self-contained samples, we have quick access to every single sample that we have recorded. We could then select whichever one we'd like to edit. In our situation, we'd like to edit that singing bowl, so if I select and stop the auto audition, I can click the edit button and there's our singing bowl. So I'll select that, crop it, and let's normalize that, save it, and you see I'll go ahead and name this singing bowl. And you can see now this is updated in our browser area for our song samples. Now I'll bring up on-screen piano keys by pressing F4. And actually I'll F3 and close out the browser. And so you can see we now have control. The sample that we recorded is mapped across the keyboard here, and we've got all these different parameters that we can use to edit and tweak the sound. So this is all pretty cool. So that is using the live sample feature within Reason. If you have any questions, leave a comment or send me a message. And I hope that this has been useful for you, and I'd really recommend taking advantage of this feature. And the next time you're doing some drum programming, if you'd like to spice things up a little bit, try recording your own sounds into each of the pads and coming up with something there, because in this way you're going to have something original to you instead of a lot of the stock drum sounds or drum kits that are available online, and you're going to have a really rich organic sound when you're working with recorded sounds in this manner as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.